Welcome back, everyone. If you happen to be joining us for the first time and wondering what this is, you're listening to the Science of Getting Rich mini series, where we take the book by Wallace D. Wattles called The Science of Getting Rich and dive into the chapters one by one to study the book. I'm not sure if I made this point last week, but it's worth making it again. When you read a book for knowledge, it is a very different experience than reading a book for change. I like to describe the difference between them a bit like the difference between taking a shower and having a bath. So bear with me here on this analogy. In a shower, the water is running over you, and some of the drops will cling to the surface of your skin, but most of that water is going to go down the drain. Now, when you read a book, it's a bit the same. Some of that information will stick and stay with you, and most of it you're going to forget. Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes that book has one message for you, and if you extract that one message and you're able to implement it and use it, then it did its job. But when you take a bath, you immerse yourself in this water. There's more interaction of your body with the water. And so together your body, your mind, your emotions can ebb and flow with the energy of the water to serve a function. And that function might be to keep you clean, and it may also serve a purpose, say to relax your body. So, through my study in this book, many things about myself, about the world, and about opportunity are starting to become very clear and apparent. And I'd love for you to be able to reflect on what are you starting to see for yourself. The lived experience of this book is revealing for me doorways within myself, doorways within the external world, the physical world, that can lead to opportunity. So, we're going to spend a bit of time talking about that. I'm going to dive into chapters 3 and 4 and do a bit of a review of these chapters. And so, have a think about what did you take away from these chapters as your understanding? And just know that your understanding and your interpretation may be different from mine, and that's perfectly fine. Our perspectives and our perceptions will be different, and that's brilliant because we're all coming at this material from a different place and time in our lives with different understanding and insights about who we are, about what we're here to do, etc. So allow the material to work with you and through you as it needs to. My offering here is simply that, an offering that you can take or leave. And with that said, let's get into it. Chapter 3. So Wattles goes into some length to talk about or talk to us about opportunity. And he wants us to know very clearly that no matter where we are coming from and no matter what we have been through, we can use the principles and the certain way to create wealth in our lives. Now, remember, he's not talking about esoteric or philosophical wealth. He's talking about real wealth, so real money in the bank. He wants us to know that it's not out of our reach, and any conversation we might be having with ourselves that it's not possible for me needs to be addressed. It needs to be dispelled and it needs to be challenged. He let us know that the invisible, or the visible supply, the visible supply is practically inexhaustible. And the invisible supply really is inexhaustible. And if you haven't digested this, I would take this quote for this week and really contemplate on that in your meditation, in your prayer, in whatever you're doing. Even if you're just at the gym, just having something that continues to remind you of this. It's such a fundamental aspect of this book. I believe we're in a time in human history where enough people know this to be the truth in their hearts. And it's challenging their own belief systems about what we know about this planet. And it's causing them to move into more of becoming who they are and how they want to live on a regular basis. So, Wattles also goes on to say that at different periods of time, at different periods, the tide of opportunity sets in different directions. So, naturally, we know that his book was written in 1910 and he uses some examples consistent with that time. And so, if we look out in the world today, what are the opportunities that we can see that are consistent with the times today? There's a lot of people talking about AI and the influence of AI, not only in terms of how we work, but also in terms of how we live and the integration into who we are. There's camps that are really quite concerned with the movement of AI and how that might affect and impact humanity in general. So, really interesting to start to see what is that then bringing to the surface in terms of people's philosophies, in terms of people's mindset, in terms of how they think, what they want, and what's possible for them. So, let me continue with this quote. It says, at different periods, the tide of opportunity sets in different directions according to the needs of the whole and the particular stage of social evolution which has been reached. I'm doing some work in the Gen Z space, and one of the things that I am continually confronted by is how many employers, in particular, and how much media there is that just consistently bags out Gen Z. And I find it amusing, but also somewhat horrifying because for me, Gen Z is a representation of a particular generation that is telling us from the previous generations that humanity has reached a particular stage of social evolution, and they're not putting up with the things that previous generations have. They don't necessarily subscribe to the 9 to 5. And if they're going to sell their soul to the devil, which many of them don't want to do, they want to know that they're going to be rewarded for it. And this is causing employers a lot of headaches. Gen Z aren't necessarily staying in the workplace or in a particular job for a length of time. So really interesting if you take a step back and you look at what are your gifts and talents, and how can you are you headed in the right direction with that, you know? Or is there some massaging and some rethinking that needs to occur for you to be able to move in a direction that is with the tide and is representative of where we're going as a human species? He goes on to say that opportunity is open. There is an abundance of opportunity for the man who will go with the tide instead of against it. So we need to be open to opportunity, and we need to be able to condition ourselves to see where the opportunity is. You know, going back a few years ago, I challenged myself to see opportunity where I had not seen it before. And at the time, I didn't recognize opportunity even when it came and sat on my lap. Let me tell you a little story here. I've been writing in a journal since I was 14, and more consistently so from about 18 onwards. And I'm now almost 50, so that's a lot of books, right? Anyway, I was reading this entry I had made back in a journal I had written when I was in my 20s. And I was already working in the coaching space, and I went for a job interview, and they were paying like $20 an hour, which at the time I thought was brilliant. Well, the guy starts talking to me about coaching because he thinks he needs it. And instead of saying something like, you know what, I can help you with that, I completely missed seeing this as an opportunity. You see, over many years prior to this, I had conditioned myself to be invisible in plain sight. And suddenly I found myself in front of somebody who was seeing me and, in effect, was asking me for help. And I completely bypassed the offer. It was to my detriment, and when you think about it, and his. So I want you to think about, maybe this applies to you in an area of life, not necessarily business or work, maybe some other area where you're being presented opportunities to step up, to step out, to get out of your comfort zone, to do something that you actually really want to do. But instead of moving forward and leaning into those opportunities, you find yourself doing the very opposite. And, one example that's really coming to mind for me this week is when you get an opportunity to offer your services and you undercut or you underprice yourself. And I wonder how many people in small business are doing that these days, right? So I'll leave you with that, and I'll leave you to think about how this applies to you. So I guess here the point is that Waddles wants us to see that there are opportunities everywhere, and they are all around you and I, but are we actually seeing them and accepting the opportunities presented to us? He then takes us into a conversation about the formless substance. And it's at this point that I get curious about you and the journey that you are on and the way that you interpret this formless substance. What is it to you? Waddles talks about the formless substance as something that is alive and intelligent. And so, what does that mean to you? Are you maybe interchanging the words of the formless substance with something like God or the universe or higher intelligence? Or are you of the mind that there's no such thing and you are acting on the basis of your own effort? I believe it's worth delving into what your beliefs are about this, as the way you interact with this material will be paramount to how you produce results. Notice I didn't say whether you produce results or not, because I don't know what you are capable of, or I don't know all of the workings of the universe. But within the realms of the study of this text, if you don't consider the formless substance alive and intelligent and actively engaged in and with you for the fulfillment of your best self, and if this somehow comes down fully to your own efforts, I'm curious how you produce results. Because while I can confirm this is not about thinking your way to success, and there's very much a need for you to take action, there's a difference between taking action with help and taking action without help. And so for me, if you don't have a belief in the formless substance, there it's almost saying like you're doing it without help. And if you're doing it without help, do you risk burnout, exhaustion, and laboring beyond your physical capability and burning out like the fly at the beginning of Price Pritchard's story? Only you can answer that. But it's one element that has really revealed itself to me this week, that we cannot do this on our own. And I don't want to personally. And for me, the interaction with this universal intelligence that has the ability to align events and situations beyond my physical capability to do so is something I know that I've personally experienced and continue to want more of. So this week I was reminded of a quote that I had come across many years ago that I wanted to share with you that really illustrates this point beautifully. It's by William Hutchinson Murray, and it says, "Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which countless ideas and splendid plans that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issue from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. I have learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream, you can. Begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it." Interesting, as we move into chapter 4 of the Waddles text, also makes these assertions. Waddles says that when man has a thought form, he takes material form, he takes material from the forms of nature. Let me just go back here and start again. When man has a thought form, he takes material from the forms of nature and makes an image in the form, which is in his mind. He has, so far, made little or no effort to cooperate with formless intelligence, to work with the Father. Man reshapes and modifies existing forms by manual labor. He has given no attention to the question whether he may not produce things from the formless substance by communicating his thoughts to it. And this is where Waddles really throws down the challenge that instead of laboring to modify what's already there, how about if you work with the formless substance and bring into existence something that doesn't exist? And he lays down some parameters for how to do this. So here's my brief version of this, and of course you can read more about that in chapter 4. He says he's urging us to acknowledge that there is a formless substance that you can co-create with, and that's going to be a personal choice for you. Then he says to go on to understand that you do not think things into existence, and that you can create from nothing in partnership with the formless substance. That you do think things into existence, but you can do that from nothing. So you can create from nothing, and you can do that in partnership. He goes on also to explain that we need to examine results and know that the way you think about things is a direct correlation to the results you get, and that to think the truth no matter what the appearance. So here is just laying down some foundations for how to think about your communication with the formless substance, where you stand with it, and what you're actually creating in your life. Are you doing this from a place of labor and without any interaction at all with the formless substance, with no help, if you can think of it that way? Or are you creating from nothing and in this co-creative process with the formless substance? So I'll leave you to think about that and how that works for you. But I have some final thoughts before we close out for today's session. In my house, there's been many ups and downs over the last few weeks as the book is living and breathing in all of us in daily life. And it's no wonder people who study the Bible say the same things. And one of the things I've been forgetting in this notion of believing in the truth, no matter what the circumstances, so that point 4, is I'm seeing things, whether I'm looking at my bank account, I'm looking at the weather, I'm looking at the news, whatever I'm looking at, those appearances are just that, appearances. They're not the truth. And the point Wattles makes in this chapter 4, is to look at things from the truth, no matter what their appearance. So there's a couple of stories I want to share with you before I close out today that goes towards the upcoming chapters in this book, but also really demonstrates this notion of faith and belief in a really beautiful way. So for you to think and know the truth, not as it appears in the physical world, but as you know it in your heart and in the invisible, requires there to be a total congruence in your ecosystem, in the whole ecosystem of your being. And I've been really challenged to understand this beyond the mind this week, because while I've had these experiences in the past and have a reference point, my courage and faith has really been tested since taking on this study and probably even a bit before. So I set myself a challenge this week. And now I just happened to be watching some things about the upcoming presidential elections. And I started to look at the way that Trump was being positioned in all of this, irrespective of your beliefs about him. He started to represent to me somebody who has absolute faith. So whether you love him or hate him, he is the underdog in this election. And he is, in my interpretation, in the fight of his life. He's been shot at in attempts to stop him from doing what he's doing and to stop him to get into presidency. So for me, there's no guarantee. If you're Trump, like I'm looking at this from my perspective through Trump's eyes, right? So there's no guarantee that you're going to make it as the president. There's a whole host of media against you. There's propaganda that's rife, going in both directions. And for me, I'm looking at him and I'm like, wow, this man has no back door. And the only way is through. And we have no idea what the results are going to be. And he is all in. And so I started to imagine if I was like that about my goals that I had set, if I was 100% all in, what would that look like? There's no room for fear and doubt and worry and confusion. I can't give any time or attention to those voices in my head that throw up any kind of concern, right? Because I'm not about the appearances. I'm about the faith and trust in the truth. And I have to believe in the formless substance and what that's bringing up for me. And I'm taking action. So remember, we're not just meditating on the couch. We're actually taking action. And I have this knowing that I will get what I need. Now, sometimes that knowing is going to come naturally, but I think that we can start to cultivate that so it becomes a natural, constant way that we exist about the things that we want and need in our life. And that's the challenge, right? But here's the thing. Appearances can be an absolute killer, because you can be grinding it out, doing everything to make things happen. And you get up and you look around and you find things in your environment that are in contradiction to what you want and where you're going. And sometimes it's going to be your own actions that are in contradiction, or inactions that are in contradiction to what you want. And that's worth paying attention to. So I was meditating on this during the week, and I was wondering, how do you have faith in spite of what you are seeing? So in spite of those appearances, how do you have faith, and how do you stay the course and do what's necessary? So I was wondering that for myself, and I was wondering that for you. Like, how do I explain that to you? How do we get to understand that in a way that we can live it, right? Because it's no point just understanding that conceptually if we're not living it. And how could I illustrate this, right? So yesterday it was kind of interesting. I got my answer. I was driving home from the airport and there was this almighty thunderstorm. And so as I'm slowing down to make a turn, my car alarm starts beeping and going off and alerting me that there's this car in front of me, and at my speed, I might hit it. And then I got it. You see, although the car is an inanimate object, bear with me here, from the car's perspective, I was going to hit the car in front of me. And so the warning lights are flashing, there's sounds going off in the car, and it's like, hello, hello, warning, warning, warning. But I'm totally in control of that car. And I have faith in my driving and faith in my ability to control the car. And I know that from my perspective, I'm not going to hit that car at all. Like, I'm fully in control. I'm going at a reasonable speed. I'm in the driver's seat, and the car is my tool. So I'm not going to take instructions from the car. The car is taking instructions from me. And that's how we have to start to think about our goals. I have this friend who's always saying she'll wait and see. And it drives me bonkers because she's in the driver's seat of the car, waiting for the car to tell her what to do. Don't do that. Take control, have faith, ignore appearances, and believe. And that's where I'm going to leave you today. Have faith, ignore appearances, believe. Next week, we're going to look at chapters 5, 6, and 7. So I'm going to encourage you to dive right into those. As always, I really love to hear from you. So if you want to share, by all means, do that. And I'd just like you to know that this video was proudly sponsored by She Leadership, that turns passionate women into powerful leaders, and the And Her Name Is podcast, both of which you can check out in the links below. Thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing you again next week.